My speech again is on COVID, so I'm sorry to bombard you with all this COVID stuff, and it's on COVID and the climate. I'm sure that you've probably read a lot about this, so I'm sorry to go over information if you already have it, but hopefully it should make it more fun and enjoyable to interpret. So like Michael, I've compiled the speech from different articles and opinions, so that's where I've got the information from. There are some keywords that I've put in the Google document, but again, I'll go over them. Again, they are carbon, carbon emissions, flight paths, shoals of fish, NASA, the World Resources Institute, the International Energy Agency, individual motorised transport, Paris Agreement on Climate Change, decarbonisation, accumulative effect, furlough, draconian, and electric vehicle charging points. Okay, I'm a long list. I wasn't sure how many to put, but that's all the words. And I'm ready. If you're ready to start, I can start my speech now. Should I count down or I'll just go? Okay, ready to start. 3, 2, 1, go. Good afternoon, everybody. Now, there's no denying that COVID-19 has had a devastating impact on communities and economies around the world. However, the pandemic has brought some positive side effects. For example, those who are lucky to still have jobs have saved a lot of time and money on transport. Those who, like me, live under numerous flight paths and near busy roads will have enjoyed a much quieter and peaceful atmosphere. And then, as we have almost all been forced to do almost all of our socializing online, I, for one, have noticed that I've been speaking to my friends abroad just as much, if not more, than my friends who live locally, which is a lovely bonus and has opened my eyes to communication opportunities post-COVID as well. Now, of course, all of the reduced personal and commercial travel that the pandemic has imposed on us has led to perhaps its biggest and best impact, and that is the effect it's had on the environment. We now have cleaner water. For the first time in years, shoals of fish and crabs have become visible in the newly crystal clear waters of the Venice canals. There has also been a surge in cycling, and according to the World Resources Institute, Philadelphia has seen the amount of cycling in the city increase by 150% during the pandemic. We also have cleaner atmospheres as well. NASA images have shown a significant reduction in harmful elements in the atmosphere. And in the first week of April, the Global Carbon Project calculated a daily global emissions drop of 17% below what we had last year. Now, of course, this is cause for celebration, of course, but we shouldn't get the champagne out just yet for several reasons. First of all, because history has shown us that there are often drops in carbon emissions following economic crises. Carbon emissions dropped after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. They dropped after the Asian financial crash in 1997, and they dropped after the global financial crisis of 2007 to 2009. In all cases, the carbon emissions regained previous levels shortly afterwards. Secondly, because the fear of catching the disease from crowded public transport could push more people to travel via cars or via other individual motorised transport for journeys that are not walkable or cyclable. And of course, this option is made even more attractive by the current low oil prices. Thirdly, because although the International Energy Agency predicts that 2020 emissions are set to drop for the entire year by 8% compared with the emissions in 2019, which would be the largest annual drop since World War II, this is still nowhere near enough to meet the target of the Paris Agreement on climate change, which is to limit global warming to only 1.5 degrees higher than before the Industrial Revolution. In fact, the world would still have more than 90% of its decarbonisation to do to be on track to meet this target. Now, this has to do with the nature of carbon, because once carbon is released into the atmosphere, it hangs around forever until it is extracted by trees or by a man-made means of extraction. Therefore, all the carbon that has already been released is still there, and it has an accumulative effect. It's like, for example, if I were to put tennis balls into a bowl. If I were to put 4 tennis balls into a bowl every day for a year, and then I decided the following year I would only put 1 tennis ball into a bowl, there would still be tennis balls in the bowl, even though they were increasing at a reduced rate. This is exactly the same with carbon. Although we are reducing our emissions, we are still adding to the carbon in the atmosphere. And therefore, upsettingly, and despite the dramatic change to our lifestyles that the pandemic has brought, in fact, beyond what anyone thought was possible, we have still not seen enough of an impact made on the climate. Now, this shows just how dependent we are on carbon, and it also shows how urgent the need is for a drastic shift in policy and the way we live our lives. However, horrible as the pandemic has been, and as that realization is, it also presents a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and it could be the best chance we may ever have to radically change the way everything works. Firstly, this is because it turns out that all radical policies that we never thought were possible, such as changing people's behaviour radically in the moment and government intervention at the drop of a hat, to house homeless people and implement mass furloughing schemes, has all been done. And although in some countries the steps taken to curb the spread of the virus have been quite draconian, people have been willing to go along with it, if it's for the health of their families. Now, this demonstrates that things we didn't think were possible are possible, and it also demonstrates to policymakers that people are willing to accept seismic changes in lifestyle if it is for the good and the health of their family and friends, and if people really are all in it together. To make sure the climate feels the benefit of this realization, we will need to change our ways of communicating the message on climate action. So far, for a lot of people, curbing climate change has been about saving trees and the planet. What we need to do now is to instill the idea that it is about saving human lives first and foremost. Secondly, because the rock bottom oil prices that we're seeing now mean that now is an ideal time for governments to remove subsidies on fossil fuels and introduce higher taxes on carbon. The money raised from such policies could be used to boost investment in green sources of energy and climate-friendly infrastructure, and this in turn will lead to more jobs. Now is also an ideal time to introduce car reduction policies, as people have so recently experienced the positives of having fewer cars on the road and the joys of travelling by bike or by foot to destinations previously reached by cars. Thirdly, because actually high unemployment can be seen as an opportunity to get large numbers of workers into jobs that will boost the green economy. For example, into installing and maintaining large networks of electric vehicle charging points, or participating in large-scale reforestation projects. Now, such projects haven't been able to be deployed so widely previously because, perhaps, of the lack of human resources available. To conclude, there is a silver lining to every cloud, as long as we approach it and communicate it in the right way. The pandemic has shown that people will change their behaviour if it is to protect the health of their families. This has been the message that has been lost vis-à-vis climate change. The message that it's a human problem and not a planetary problem. Now is the time to change that. COVID-19 has demonstrated that our current system is precarious. Disasters that had long been talked about but not acted upon can occur with no warning and can turn our lives inside out from one day to the next. Governments now have an unprecedented opportunity to flatten two curves with one stone. I, for one, really hope that they don't waste it. Thank you.